Hey, what's up, everyone? Welcome to the Easter Pod. I'm your host, Corey Easterday, and on this episode, we are chatting with the one and only John Kenneth Muir. I was very excited to talk to John. Now, I'm trying a bit of a new thing with the podcast. In the past, I've typed out a lot of notes, just basically kind of write out everything I want to say at top of the intro. Two things. One, want to try to make these intros a bit shorter, get to the meat of the conversation. I have great guests on all these episodes. Want you to be able to hear what they have to say and kind of take care of business in a more efficient manner. And two, as some of you may know, I've recently, over the last year and a half, started a foray into stand-up comedy. And one of the things that's greatly helped me with is the ability to just kind of improv, have confidence in what I want to say. And I really believe that the two things, being a podcast host, doing stand-up comedy, really complement each other and can kind of help out in both worlds. So this is my attempt to do that. And also, candidly, I got a lot of things going on, so I don't always have all the time I want to be able to meticulously go through every detail of things like this. So hopefully it makes the podcast better, makes the show better. I won't give that little preamble every time I do the intro. Just want to keep you, the listener, informed whenever we try something new. Because this podcast has been going on for 5 years now, which is crazy to think. This is episode 33 episodes, 5 years, 30 plus amazing, wonderful guests. I really, even though some episodes are a little bit dated, I really encourage you to kind of go back through the catalog, go back through the library, check out some of our past episodes, including the one I just did. Well, not just did, last July, August. By the way, I'm a new dad. In case, if you somehow listen to the podcast but don't follow me on social media, we're not connected in other ways. I have a 4-month, almost 5-month-old daughter now, which is, I don't know what my excuse was before that, but that's part of the reason for this hiatus between episodes, because the last one I did was with Billy Mays III, son of the late, great pitchman Billy Mays. And Billy Mays III is an amazing friend, musician, creative, just an all-around incredible human being. That was the last episode. He and I recorded when he was in town last summer, put that out. So check that out. Check out the other past episodes. The tagline for the Easter Pod, and partly kind of merged with our company, Easterday Creative, is to bring you stories of rad humans that inspire you to engage the world with creativity and hope. I sincerely believe my conversation with John today accomplishes that mission. Conversations we've had in the past accomplish that mission. So please check them out. And what can I say about John? I don't give too much away of our conversation. John and I covered a lot of ground. John is a director and creator and star and writer and all the titles of the new web series Abnormal Fixation. And I have the honor of playing a character called the Professor in Abnormal Fixation. John and I get into what Abnormal Fixation is about, how you can consume it, watch it, all that stuff. By the time you hear this, I think there's a couple episodes out available on YouTube. Just search Abnormal Fixation. It'll come right up. Check those episodes out. Give it a watch. John is a great creative. He's become a great friend, and I really enjoyed the opportunity to be a part of this project and act on it and all that stuff. So much fun. If you like the Easter Pod, if you're enjoying the content you've listened to that we've kind of put out through the show over the past 5 years, please be sure to follow the show on social media, subscribe on your podcast platform of choice. If you dig the show, please leave a rating, a review, share with friends, all the things. All of that really helps a lot, means a lot. And, shout out Easterday Creative, our business, that kind of, working in tandem to try and help bring you these stories of rad humans. Special thanks, as always, to my friends, Speak Seldom for creating the music, JD Laird and Token for helping to produce this episode and brand the podcast, all that stuff. Please check out Token's work, tokencreative.co. If you want to follow along with my stuff that I'm involved in and doing, whether it be nonprofit work, the podcast, comedy, Easter egg creative, music, all the things, arguably too many things, but we'll get that sorted out eventually. Check out at The Easter Dude on all social platforms, at Corey Easterday on X. And of course, please check out John Kenneth Muir. Check out our conversation, get to know him, follow him on social media. He gives that information at the end of the episode. Check out his website. Check out Abnormal Fixation on YouTube. JohnKennethMuir.com, I believe, is the website. And he's JK Muir on X. I believe it's household_LAR on Instagram. Just search, you'll find a way to connect them, especially if you go to our podcast page at the Easter Pod. We'll link to all that, and we'll link to things in the show notes. So check out the show notes. Always a helpful resource. And I think that pretty much covers it. How's that for some light improv? I don't know that I accomplished my goal of being any shorter in the intro, but that's okay because there's no tag at the end of the episode. What you hear from here on out is the conversation, some music, and that's it. So hopefully if you haven't fast forwarded through this, it's been worth your time. And yeah, I'm excited for you to check out my conversation with John. Phenomenal human being, phenomenal creative, great director to work with, very funny AF. It's a little inside joke in Abnormal Fixation. And overall, it's a joy to speak with him. Hope you enjoy the conversation. And without further ado, my conversation with John Kenneth Muir. I am stoked to be sitting down on the Easter Pod today with a truly phenomenal human being and a new friend I've made over the last couple years. Get ready, this is going to be a mouthful. He's a writer, director, actor, film producer, author, podcaster, literary critic, so much more. He's also the creator and star of the new web series Abnormal Fixation, where I have the distinct honor of playing the role of the mysterious professor, John Kenneth Muir. Welcome to the Easter Pod. How are you doing today?
I am doing well, and thank you so much for having me on the show. I am loving being here with you, a stand-up comedian, a podcaster, an actor, all of your incredible talents, Corey. So it's wonderful to be here sitting across from you.
Thank you. It's very important that you get all my multi-hyphenates in as well as the guest.
Absolutely.
Mutual.
That's right.
No, I am excited to be sitting down today. We got connected for some brief context through mutual friends, Chris and Alicia Martin. Alicia has been a past guest on the Easter Pod. Had a really great conversation with her. I met you at Alicia's birthday party, and then like a year later, you reach out and you're like, "Hey, I'm doing a thing. Do you want to be a part of it?" So that was pretty nice of you to reach out after one personal interaction.
Well, I just knew. One of the things about, creating...
When you know, you know.
When you know, you know. When you're creating something, whether it's an audio drama or a web series, it's not creepy. I promise you it's not creepy, but you do look at people and say, could they do this? Would they be interested in doing this? Are they funny? Are they interesting? Do I think they can memorize lots of lines in a short amount of time? All those things. So I had the idea that, it sounds terrible. I got to use you in something, Corey. So from that event, I thought, I got to use him in something. It's just finding what that thing is. And then as soon as we put together the plan for Abnormal Fixation, there was the character you mentioned, the professor. And by then I knew you were doing stand-up comedy as well as a podcast. And so for me, those two things are like funny and authority. And that's sort of a sweet spot for the professor, I think. I don't know, but he's your character, so you can tell the audience. What do you think?
Well, he's a product of your brilliant writing, if I may be so effusive in my praise. And I hope that by having you on the show and being effusive in my praise, that it'll expand my role much larger in season 2. It's the real. I'm just kidding. Like you said, the stand-up comedy. No, I do think that, you approached me, and it was funny because when I worked in Starbucks back in the day, like 10 years ago, when the first Edward Snowden stuff was kicking off in the news, I remember there was a group of older gentlemen in their 60s or 70s that would come into Starbucks every morning at like 5:30 a.m. and they would just sit there and like laugh at me and like talk amongst themselves and just smirk and do it. And one day I'm like, what is going on? I'm not that interesting. I'm just back here making coffee and, cleaning up the store and whatever. And then one day one of them comes up to me and tells me what all the fuss is about. I look like Edward Snowden. And that's when I discovered in earnest who this Edward Snowden character was. So imagine my great surprise and joy when 10 years later you come to me and you're like, hey, I'm looking for an Edward Snowden type for this role. I think you fit the bill. And hopefully I brought, some of that good stand-up comedy, podcaster, personality and energy to it. But, the role as I saw is like, without giving too much away about the show, I mean, it's really part of this team and, friend of your lead character, Elvis Bragg. And the role of the professor is to be the mysterious professor. And as somebody that is a goober, but tries to be as mysterious as possible on a daily basis, I felt a kinship to the role. What can I say?
Well, you absolutely nailed it. And the Snowden thing, definitely, I saw and I thought, he is so Edward Snowden. Right? So we watched, I can't remember what the film was. It was a documentary about him. And we looked at how he dressed and we looked at how he reacted to his environment. And we worked like a lot of those details into the story for you. But you definitely took it beyond that. It's not a Snowden imitation. It's sort of a Snowden homage, maybe.
There you go. I never thought I would be typecast into the role of playing homage to a national traitor and defector, but life takes you funny places. What can I say?
That's right.
I really enjoyed being a part of Abnormal Fixation and shooting last summer, being in the cast. It was my first acting role really since like grade school plays or something. Like it's not something I had. I mean, there's performance involved in music and stand-up comedy and podcasting, all these things, but my first time in a very, very long time having to memorize lines in a script. Not since the last play I can remember I was a part of was we put on Sister Act 2 at the school I went to. It was a church called the House of the Lord in Akron, and I went to school there, and I was the only white kid, but exactly, of my entire school. So Sister Act 2, there was kind of a similar demographic. So I played the role of the white kid in Sister Act 2 who got to rap and do some lines and do whatever. So I really ate that up. So that was from there to here, quite the arc. But I really enjoyed the opportunity to just memorize lines and dive into a character because I'm I know you're the same. We'll get into this, but you've written, 34 books on,
that's right.
Like on movies and sci-fi and horror and all, TV shows, all this kind of stuff.
Right.
And I've always been that was something we bonded over at the birthday party. I've always been a huge film and TV nerd and all this stuff. So all of which to say, the opportunity to take from, consuming all this media and entertainment that I enjoyed actually being a part of it. Like I really genuinely do have to thank you for allowing me to dive into that because that was so cool to make that connection and be a part of that.
Well, I want to thank you for being a part of it because you fit the bill physically. And again, what I described, sort of the comedy and authority at the same time in sort of twisted proportions. That's sort of who the professor is, and that's what you bring to it. I always say I have been extremely fortunate in terms of casting. I think, whatever qualities I have, I think I have a good eye for picking people that I want to be in my productions. And so far that hasn't failed. So I want you to know that, Corey. You're great.
I'm glad I'm not the first failure.
That's right. That's right. It's like, oh my gosh, well, I can't say that anymore. No, you're great. And, I don't want to give anything away, but we did some really funny stuff together.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, our characters have a really fun dynamic that I am genuinely looking forward to exploring more as we do more episodes and whatnot. But I've gotten too far in this conversation and our mutual effusive praise for one another without mentioning the fact that Abnormal Fixation is quite the award-winning series so far. Can you speak on that? Like how I had no idea that you've just been every day I wake up and I'm tagged in a new post about a new award it's winning. Like just speak to that. Well,
it's been absolutely amazing. So we put the first episode together and of course we thought it was going to be good. You don't do something like this and think it's going to be bad, but we put it together and we looked at it and it was sort of, holy cow, this is more than good. This is really, really funny. It doesn't flag in terms of its pace. It really works. And so I thought, almost on a lark, well, I'll enter this in a film festival. I'll enter it in a couple film festivals. And lo and behold, we started winning. We started winning in multiple categories in multiple festivals. I mean, not to be braggy or anything, but
you're on the show. You're Elvis Bragg.
I'm Elvis Bragg, so I have to brag, right? We've won Best Web Series, Best Sound Design, Best Actor, Best Supporting Actor, Best Actress. All of these awards. It's just astonishing to me. Not that I don't think it's good. I just am so happy about the reception it's gotten, that people enjoy it so much. And that's really why we did this. I think, one of the things I really wanted from Abnormal Fixation is to do this kind of show that people just really enjoy, that people like to laugh in it, watch with their friends, watch with their family, and you can kind of leave the world behind a little bit and just enjoy this really silly, really over-the-top kind of comedy production. Instead of doing, what I've done in the past, which is more intense, straight science fiction or horror, having the comedy, wacky elements to this seems to have been like the thing that sparked, the success of the show at this moment, in the festivals and such.
Well, and I'm glad you brought that up, because you already, you didn't come into this as like a first production. You've done other projects in the past that have had a really good reception, and you've, for lack of a better way to say it, you're somebody that's been known in these circles for quite some time through your work as an author and your past productions. If you can, just speak to your past productions. Like, I know there was The House Between. We've entered The House Between more recently.
Right.
So yeah, feel free to touch on that, like kind of the stuff leading up to Abnormal Fixation before we kind of dive more into the present project.
Well, back in 2006, that was a totally different media landscape, but the tools for making productions were really becoming available. You could afford to film things. You could afford to do special effects. We had all these editing programs for, home computers at that point. And the last sort of notch in that equation was that we had the internet, and suddenly we did have video streaming sites. So you had distribution. So in other words, you don't need the middleman anymore. You don't need to get some deal and get a distributor. We could go right to the audience and say, if you like it, watch this, like us. And that was an amazing thing. And so in that environment, all those years ago, almost 20 years ago, we created this low budget sci-fi drama called The House Between. And it took off. We got nominated for awards, Sci-Fi Portal Awards at the time, things like that. And I really believed that, we were on the wave of sort of independent television, that, people were going to be making all of these original web series. But I think maybe we were a little too soon, right? Because at the time, what everybody was doing was sort of fan films, Star Trek fan films, Star Wars fan films. Like, no one was doing independent original productions. And so even the awards we won and were nominated for, like, we were always competing like with titles like Star Trek or Star Wars, and it's like, that's just crazy. That's just crazy. But it was very hard to sustain because it's expensive to do this. So we did 21 episodes, and it seemed like, well, that was it. We sort of pierced the pop culture bubble a little and then receded. And some years passed, and we got together for a Zoom reunion for The House Between, the cast and crew. This was 2020 during the pandemic, and I was re-editing the series at that time to get it onto YouTube, because this is how long ago it was that we had it on something called VO and Google Video, because you couldn't put 30-minute episodes on YouTube. They had a 10-minute limit. So we couldn't even get it on YouTube at the time. So we were, trying to encourage people to watch VO, to watch Google Video. And I thought, well, this is the time to get it on YouTube and see if anything happens. But what it really did was spark everyone's interest in continuing the story. And that's how we created the audio drama Enter the House Between. I am very, very fortunate because I know next to nothing about audio, but Tony Mercer, who played Bill Clark on The House Between, is an amazing sound designer, mixer, engineer, all these things. So he said, John, there's the possibility that you can do this as an audio drama. And, that way it can account for the fact like we can still do this and not look too old. Because if you do something 20 years ago and you do it now, people say, you look so much older than you did when you did the original show. So, that's great. We don't have to be on camera. That's wonderful. And everyone will be making the comparisons to us now as to how we looked in 2006. So we did a season of that. We won an AVA award. We won a Hermes award for that. And it was great fun. And we still have some episodes like in the can to continue the show. So I'm hoping that, episodes will continue to come out for that. But last year, I thought, we need to create something new because some of the feedback I've gotten about Enter the House Between, everyone says they like it. But if you didn't watch the original show and now it's sort of 20 years out of date, maybe it's a hard point of entrance, the audio drama. It's like, wait, who are these people? What's going on? It's a continuation. But I didn't watch the first 21 episodes. So I said, let's start something new, something maybe a little bit more commercial, something a little funnier. And, everybody looks great. So I thought, well, let's get back on camera, but in new characters so people don't compare us to where we were 20 years ago. And that's how Abnormal Fixation began.
That's exciting to hear. I mean, to have those projects and they all kind of are award-winning, piercing the pop culture bubble, like you so eloquently said, to some extent. That's got to be exciting as a creator that the stuff you're creating is breaking through, even if it's, it's easy to compare to other productions and things, but to the extent that it has to be very affirming for you doing these types of projects that people respond to them each time you come out with one.
It's been so meaningful to me. I mean, I will never forget. We did the first season of The House Between, and that we got a little bit of tension, but then it seemed to take off considerably in the second season, and that's when we began to get fans, and they would write on discussion boards about each episode and have theories about the characters and the episodes. Like, that is so awesome to have people talking about characters that we created and a storyline we created, and to be able to go on every day and say, oh, what did they say about it? Even if it was crazy and way off, it's like, oh, I just love that they're talking about this thing. So I mean, that's an absolutely amazing experience to have as a creator, to see how something that you worked on with so many talented people has now taken on a life of its own and is out there. I mean, there are two sides to it because sometimes people won't like what you did or they won't like a choice you make in a specific episode. But just to have people talking about it and having theories about it, I mean, it's the greatest feeling you can ever have as an artist, I think.
Yeah, having people actually invested in the art you're creating is always a big deal. What crossover do you feel like there was? Because one of the things that drew me to Abnormal Fixation before we even shot or anything was it's just extremely well written. Like,
thank you.
I'm not some guy that's out here getting a script. Literally the first script I've read in 20 years or whatever. But I just was, as somebody that reads and responds to these different cultural things, and you kind of develop a palate and a taste for things. I just remember it struck me as very much within my taste and my palate of the way you fleshed out the characters, the plot devices, the story arc, everything you kind of look for in a production as far as the writing was there. And I was watching some behind the scenes thing with actors recently or whatever. And they're talking about, they always talk about, I'm so drawn to the writing of this. I really like the writing. Do you feel like there's a lot of crossover of being an author? And you can get into a little bit to your authorship if you want, but just writing so many books and then writing these productions, do you feel like it kind of crossed over and set you up well? Because I just feel like these productions hinge that you've created on the good writing, and it's just there from the start.
Oh, that is such a nice thing to say. I appreciate that so much. There definitely is crossover. I spent my 20s and 30s writing books. And most of those books were, I don't want to say, I don't like the word critic because for me, my enjoyment of movies and TV shows comes from my appreciation of them. I prefer to write about things that I enjoy and like. I'm always really depressed when I hate something. When I think something is bad or whatever, it's like, oh, wow, I'm so sad because I would much rather it be good or that I like it. And so that sort of idea of appreciation, I think what's involved there is looking really closely at why do I appreciate it? What do I enjoy about it? Well, it's how they created the drama. It's how the narrative moves. It's how the camera moves. It's how it's lit. It's the wonderful actors in it. It's what they bring to it. It's, sometimes a magic alchemy even, between the shots where you think, people have chemistry, right? And so, creating something like Abnormal Fixation, you're thinking about all of that. You're thinking about, who can I bring into this? What's the narrative? Like, what are things that I have liked elsewhere? So one of the books I wrote was about Christopher Guest films, and he directed Waiting for Guffman, Best in Show, A Mighty Wind, of course, was in Spinal Tap. Those are all quote unquote mockumentaries, although he's very clear that he's never mocking anybody. He's just observing. He doesn't feel that he mocks anybody. But the broad term for that category is mockumentary. And what I thought would be interesting would be to do, a mockumentary along those lines, but with sort of different outlines. He's often in the world of music, and I thought it'd be really interesting to chart ideas of belief and skepticism in the paranormal world. Things like Bigfoot, the chupacabra, all that kind of stuff. And that's what Abnormal Fixation is. So I feel like I've brought many years, because, I'm not a young guy, many years of looking at films and TV shows and thinking like, these are the things I like. These are the forms I learn, and then bringing them to my productions. Because if you look at those Christopher Guest movies, which are wonderful, what he's really doing is making a documentary. So you have to understand, when you make a mockumentary, how to make a documentary. So you have to understand how the pieces of the documentary go together and how a documentary should move. So again, it's like, for me, it's almost like my whole career has been gathering these influences, understanding and learning these techniques, and then trying to bring them into my own productions. And that's harder than it might sound. One of the great things, for me in this process is like, being a critic or an appreciator, as I like to say, is one thing. Say, why didn't it turn out? Well, then you try to do it. It's so hard to actually do it. Filmmaking is so hard. Oh my gosh. It's amazing you get anything. It's amazing you get something that you can use. It's amazing when you get something good. It is so much work, so much effort, so much time. And I think that even though I was always a compassionate, I hope, critic when I write reviews, this doing it myself makes me even more compassionate, because I see how much blood, sweat, and tears goes into this. All the love you put into your performance, the technique that Tony brings to the sound design and the lighting, what Alicia and Chris bring to their performances, all of that. I mean, it's just incredible, and so much energy goes into that.
Well, I love the way you describe, your literary criticism and your whole framework for it, because occasionally I'll hop on Twitter, X, and I'll write a 200-something character review of a show I really like, or I'll just try to flex that, work that muscle, so that I'm putting thoughts out there, instead of just I consume so much media and entertainment. It's I want to just put it somewhere,
right?
That I like what I think about these things and how they make me feel and why I respond to them. And the critics and the people that have podcasts and write books and whatever that I've always felt the most kinship with are the ones that have a deep appreciation for whatever it is that they're covering.
Right.
And like you said, there's almost a sadness when something isn't good or doesn't work out. You don't revel in, somebody else's misfortune or misery, because you have that sympathy and empathy, especially as a creator, that all the work that goes into it, all the love, rarely, every production is different and there's always exceptions to the rule, but rarely does somebody set out to create something that is supposed to be bad.
Right.
Or that, I think of the story of The Room and Tommy Wiseau. And for those that don't know, The Room was dubbed the best, worst film ever made. That's a huge point of nerddom for me. I've gotten into all the lore around it, gone to screening, all this kind of stuff. So it's basically he was this mysterious figure that set out so earnestly to make this dramatic James Dean-esque love story in a production, but because of numerous reasons that we don't have time to get into, it just turned out to be this thing that at its premiere, everybody's just laughing uproariously at and, having to embrace that journey over time. But the point being, that's an example to me of, folks are setting out to do these things earnestly, to act, to direct, to write, to create, whatever.
Right.
So I think having that deep appreciation is important. And it all makes sense, the crossover of you're studying all these works and you're thinking about them in a critical fashion. And then when it's your turn to create, you have all those things to pull from. What did I like? What did I not like? What did I think works? What doesn't? I think you have to be on kind of both sides of it almost to some extent to be like a holistic creator and appreciator of this art form.
I think so too. And I learned a lesson probably around the same time I was doing The House Between. I started my blog in 2005, and it's on its 20th year. There are almost 12,000 posts. I blog a lot. And early on, I was like, I'm writing on the internet now. I'm not writing a book. And my books are, pretty scholarly. And I thought, I'm going to review this TV movie, and I didn't like it. And I was really snide and nasty in this one review because I thought that's what internet critics are supposed to be. And I got a comment on the blog that said, wow, the reason I come here is because you don't do this stuff. And I realized they were so right. I wasn't true to myself. I was trying to be, popular, trying to, fit the form, but I wasn't doing what I needed to do. I wasn't doing what brings my audience to me, which was meeting the material where it is and saying what I like about it and then assessing honestly, but not meanly, why I thought it didn't meet, certain criteria. And, I'm so thankful to that commenter for saying that and for making me sort of stop. I got that feedback and I realized you cannot undertake this like this. You are not a snide person. I mean, it was funny. It was sharp. It was well written, but it was nasty, and I'm just not that person. And so that changed the direction. I thought, okay, I'm going to double down in the other direction. And I'm going to really be this appreciator because that's who I am. I'm not the mean snide person. I thought, I'll get more hits, whatever. But it was a valuable lesson. I learned not to do that. And I've never really done it again. Thank God.
I think the self-awareness piece comes out in the things you create or just for creators in general. Like I did a stand-up open mic recently and somebody that, had seen me perform a couple of times before and said they were like a really big fan or they enjoyed it or whatever. They came up to me afterwards and were like, hey, can I offer you some feedback? And I'm like,
uh-oh.
Two thoughts. It's like, well, yes, thank you, because, people don't care. They're not going to say anything. So, and they even said, like, I'm saying this because I care. I think you're good or whatever. But they were like, the way you kind of said these things or whatever in your set, I know how they were intended, but they kind of came off as being pretentious or this or that,
right.
Stuff that, and I relate to the story you were sharing, because it's like, yeah, when you're trying to do something that is ultimately outside of your zone and kind of who you are and who you know yourself to be, but you're doing it because you're trying to achieve the opposite effect. Like
right.
You're trying, well, I'm usually like this, but this other thing seems to be popular, so let me try this. And you veer away from that. You're actually veering away from what's made you even mildly successful in the first place to whatever degree. So that's good. I just think the self-awareness piece is important to touch on as a creator of any art, because that's the thing too, is I'll listen to people giving interviews about whatever they've created within kind of a film production. We'll keep it to that setting. And I'm just always so drawn to these folks because they seem to have like this level of growth and self-awareness, self-actualization that comes through in their performance and the thing they're giving to people. I did want to ask, why the emphasis for you throughout your career on horror and sci-fi genres?
Oh, that's a good question. That really does require some self-awareness, I think. For me, horror certainly is the genre that, well, there's no BS to it. It's not trying to get an Oscar. It's not pandering. It's not really, a mainstream thing. There's certain people who never put on a movie called The Texas Chainsaw Massacre. But there's an honesty in horror that I truly appreciate. And horror, I believe, is very pro-social. It tells us what's wrong in the world, what we should be afraid of, like before we're consciously aware of it. It's always about what things scare us as a society. And that's why horror is always changing. You have, very different formats of horror, right? From slashers in the 80s to, found footage and elevated horror. Now, it's constantly changing because what scares us as Americans, as human beings, changes as we, deal with new technologies, new social settings, social media, new political settings, all that stuff. So for me, I just really love horror because I feel like it's true. I like science fiction too, I guess, because I'm sort of obsessed with the idea of what will the future bring, right? Either dystopia or utopia. But it's probably also, I'm also a product of my upbringing. I was 5 years old and living in New Jersey, and my parents sat me down in front of a TV show called Space 1999. And the episode that I saw was about this sort of monster in a spaceship that would like hypnotize astronauts and draw them into its, its maw. It would like suck them in, and then it would spit them out as steaming bones. And as a 5-year-old, and this was on television, it was just astonishing to me that this whole idea of us getting so far that we can go to space, travel to different worlds, and then meet something like this there. So, if you call it Lovecraftian, whatever you want to call it, but that idea of, this great technological accomplishment against like discovering something truly awful and monstrous, just really stuck with me. And that's probably why I love science fiction and horror, that conjunction of that.
I definitely lean as a fan more into the horror genre than science fiction. I appreciate sci-fi, and there's a lot of sci-fi works of art that I enjoy, but what you said to me about horror is so striking and true, because I know you wrote a book on this exact decade, but I just watched a 4-hour documentary a few weeks ago, In Search of Darkness. It's about like the iconic horror of the 80s.
Right.
I think that's what it was called, but it was on Amazon Prime. Folks can look it up, but it was came out in 2019 or 2020, and it was 4 hours long because it walked you through every year in the 80s and what came out in horror that year. And it was just such a time capsule and such like the way my brain works. I appreciate like the direct timeline of, and you see it evolve over the course of a decade, but then you kind of take it as a whole and see what it was in that decade and how it reflected the culture and the times and what was happening in 80s greed and wealth and Reaganism and all these different themes and subjects. And to like really zoom out big picture and look at the horror genre as a reflection of society and our innermost, our shadow selves, if you will.
Right.
It explained to me, it gave me a better context of why I've always been so drawn to that genre. I think at first growing up, because truthfully, I didn't have any boundaries on what I could watch growing up, for better or worse. So I think at first it was just like the shock and awe of what was on my screen. I remember seeing the movie. Well, I won't get into specific movies. I don't want to freak anybody out that isn't like a huge horror fan, but I just remember seeing movies that these indelible images from my childhood. It was like, wow, I've never seen that ever, like let alone on a screen. But then as I got older, I really realized like, oh no, this genre really has a lot to say, like politically and socially and otherwise.
It does, and I think that's because people really misperceive it. They think, oh, it's just bloody, it's just gore, it's violence, and it doesn't have any social value. And as soon as, you say that about a genre, it can do anything. It can tell you about politics. It can, tell you, in the 80s, you're talking about AIDS, about, conservatism to some extent, the Reagan Revolution, all that stuff, can then go into those films. And I always say, you can enjoy a horror movie if you don't know the context. Sure, everyone can enjoy a good jump scare. But if you do know the context and what is happening in the world, like the movie just opens up to you and it becomes about so much more than just a jump scare. So it's like, yeah, if you're just watching these movies for the jump scares, you're like missing a whole parallel track there. It's like, what is this really commenting on? And the human experience in the world around it when it was made. And I love that. And I think that's easier to do with horror, to analyze that in some sense, because it doesn't have that restriction of it has to be mainstream. It has to have a star. It's got to be palatable. Horror movies transgress. They break decorum. They break rules, so that you actually feel sometimes endangered while watching it in the theater. And to me, that's amazing. It's like they disarm you and then they start speaking truth to you, right? I love that. I love that equation.
I know that could be a whole separate podcast about that genre. But yeah, I was lucky enough to be on one of my friend's podcasts a few years ago talking about like John Carpenter films.
Oh, yeah.
And he's always been one of my favorite directors and the original Halloween and stuff like that. But just going through his timeline, the stuff he's done, studying him as a director really spoke to a lot of that, of like the kind of love and social commentary and work he puts into his movies. But yeah, very drawn to that genre. So I think that was one of the things we first bonded over. I would love, without any, kind of spoilers or whatever, as much as we can tiptoe around it, if you would just, dive in for a couple minutes, describe Abnormal Fixation, what it's about, why folks should watch. Give us the promo, the teaser.
All right, the teaser.
Well, sorry, one last piece of context. This episode, our conversation will be coming out in the midst of the run of episodes. I'm not quite sure where yet.
Okay.
So I think it's safe to just kind of cover it as a, spoiler free as a whole. We're not doing the weekly recap here, so we can kind of broad strokes for anybody that is interested.
All right. So it's comedy horror, and Abnormal Fixation is really about this character named Elvis Bragg, and he undertakes a quest. He has to prove the existence of the paranormal in 1 year because he signed a contract with a skeptical organization called Skepticop, and he will win $250,000. Skepticop will pay him if he can prove the supernatural or paranormal in 1 year's time, get $250,000. If he doesn't, though, he has to pay Skepticop. So there is a lot on the line for him. But that's just really one piece of it. The other piece of it is the CEO of Skepticop, his name is Mark Missouri. He is Elvis's nemesis. And Elvis has been married to this wonderful woman named Susan, played by Alicia Martin. And as the show begins, she has left him for his nemesis, Mark Missouri. So Elvis is not only trying to win the $250,000, he's trying to win his wife back from his nemesis. And how Elvis does that, I think, says a lot about him. He brings in his entourage of crazy friends, the professor, Bleeder, Dr. Carol, his unpaid interns, Natalie and Ridley. Elvis is a disaster by himself, but he's a force of nature of disaster with all of his friends. Right? Once you get that team together, you just don't know what's going to happen. So the first 6 episodes of the series tell a story about Elvis and his entourage investigating a local myth, the Woodpire Mill Phantom, and attempting to prove it's real and that it, so he can get his money. I guess that's it in broad strokes.
Yeah, no, it's a great description. And, it speaks to the way you have to kind of memorize things and then brain dump it, because literally part of my role is to help explain what the Woodpire Mill Phantom is. And I would love to just deliver that monologue right now, but I
do it.
My brain is just like I spent weeks learning it, and then it's just like, but I think that's a great description of it. And that was part of what was like, I think like any good work of art, Abnormal Fixation has that dual meaning.
Yes.
Not to put too fine a point on it, but that was what I appreciate about too. It's not just a story about the paranormal. It's got a lot of layers to it.
I hope that's true. I mean, I know it's a crazy thing to say, but I feel there's probably more of me personally and my life and, my personality and my history in this story than anything I've actually really ever written before, which is crazy because it's a comedy and it's nuts. But there are so many pieces of it that I identify with and really come from, my personal life, I feel like, right? I don't know why, but it's as silly as it is, it's the most personal thing I've ever written.
I think that, without knowing you super well, I think that comes through just in the earnestness of it.
Okay.
And the genuineness of what I wanted to reference too is like just an incredible cast of characters, great crew. Everyone I interact with on the production and everyone you've assembled, the way the characters are written, I do feel like part of the reason it's been winning these awards and being received so well so far is like there really is that good chemistry there amongst everyone involved.
I feel like that. I very much feel that's true. And again, I'm so glad you're on the team because you are sort of new to this little repertory company we have. We have a couple other new people, Pauline and Rachel and Jaeja and Ethan. So it's like we took this core group that worked on The House Between and Enter the House Between, and I feel like we have a lot of chemistry. And then we opened it up to this, second generation of folks of which you're a part. And the amazing thing is that like this new and beautiful chemistry, I feel like exists that, it is partially the old chemistry and partially is the new chemistry. It's, it's all this magic of the new people interacting. We had Leslie and Chris on Enter the House Between. They were new there. So now they're part of the team. But, you being in it and all the people I just mentioned, it's really multiple generations now of this tight group. And it really does sometimes come down to chemistry. Certainly comedy does. Of whether something works or not. And so you're always grateful when you see it occur because it's like you're looking at the page and you're like, we're banking on the fact that you're going to have chemistry with this person. You know, and we sure hope that's going to materialize. It's like, because you can't say as a director, you know, have chemistry with, you know, Alicia, or have chemistry with Chris or Leslie or whatever.
Some things cannot be coached or taught.
That's right.
In that regard, I totally feel that when it comes to stand up, like what I have written on the page versus performing it. There are so many times where I'm like, I've said a joke 100 times, or I just kind of have these preconceived thoughts or notions about it, or the way I perceive it. So I'll be like, not that it's not funny, but it's kind of lost some of its luster for me. And I'll go and deliver it on stage as like trying to have that chemistry, that organic rapport with the audience. And the words will come out and people will, this isn't a self-pat on the back. It's just more of a illustration of surprise of like, people will laugh or they'll really enjoy a joke that I've kind of placed in a different part of my brain. And it's always surprising to me, like, wow, there's some, you know, but I think a lot of that is the best stand-up comics I enjoy watching are ones that are like really able to, you feel like they're really present in the room with you. They're really there. Like, so there's a rehearsal, there's a performance element to it, but that you're having a real rapport together. And I think that's really come through in what you've created here from that standpoint.
I very much think that's true. And, you know, it's funny because creating a comedy, you know, you write it, you learn it, you watch it when it's being edited, you watch it when it's color graded, you watch it with the sound design. It's like, oh my gosh, I've heard these jokes a million times. And then it's such a delight when somebody else watches it for the first time and they just crack up and laugh and you say, oh, I forgot how funny that was. Like, it was really funny to me when I wrote it.
Right.
But now I've done it, you know, I've listened to it hundreds of times.
Sucked the funny out of it.
I have, you know, it's like, so I really enjoy watching Abnormal Fixation with a new audience who you know, they haven't experienced the jokes yet. So it's all new to them. You think, oh gosh, that's great. It lands, it works.
Yeah. And it's really cliche. You hear it all the time in behind the scenes footage, but just, you know, being at your house and eating tacos together, or, you know, whatever, casserole after the performances, like, it really does have a family feel. It's really cool.
I love it. I mean, for me, it is a family. And that's one reason I do this, because, you know, sometimes, you know, we talk about this, my wife and I. Catherine, you know, is the producer for the show, and she's in the show. She plays Alyssa Jarvis, the documentarian who's following Elvis around on his quest with his entourage. You know, and she says, you know, you write books and you do this, but this is a big deal. This is like expensive and it's exhausting. I said, yes, but I get to be with all these people. We get to be with all these people. She's like, I know, I love everybody, right? We love doing it, but it's like, yes, oh my gosh. You know, the reason to do it is the family. It's the joy of it. It's the joy of seeing you, of seeing you then, you know, do your thing and then have the casserole with us. It's the joy of, you know, being at Alicia and Chris's house and you know, doing these crazy scenes with them and then hanging out with them and ask them, how's their kids? What do you know? It's like, it's such a great thing to create together and then be together. And I just love that.
Yeah. I mean, I was literally talking to another stand-up comedian the other day that we were talking about, like, what's the point of doing this if there's not joy in it?
Absolutely.
And I mean, like you said, you hit the nail on the head for me. All these, whether it's the podcast or comedy or Abnormal Fixation, these different things, there's not a lot of income from some of these. If anything, yeah, you're putting out resources,
right?
But the joy of collaboration and working together with folks that you enjoy spending time with, really, you know, I hate to be cliche, it really is priceless. Like, it outweighs a lot of it.
I could not agree more. I mean, it is just such an amazing thing to me. I feel so good doing that. You know, I say it's like a drug, but it really is. It's just so amazing to see people do these things, to create these things with people. There is nothing better in life than creating something that's magical with people you absolutely love. And, you know, and grow to love as you get to know them, you know, and you're all rooting for each other. You're all rooting for this thing. It's just a magical experience. And, you know, we lost David Lynch yesterday, one of my favorite directors. And, you know, that's such a grave loss to, you know, the creative community, the artistic community. And I get why so many people love him, you know, and he created and fostered this environment where people could do amazing things where they couldn't do they couldn't do it elsewhere, you know, and there'll be nobody like him again that does that because Hollywood has changed so much. It's so corporate now. It doesn't, you know, make the room for somebody who thinks in symbols and, you know, things like that and dreams, right? His films are so much like dreams. And I just think, you know, not at all to compare Abnormal Fixation to that, but, you know, on a very, you know, small level, I mean, it's the same thing. It's like getting together with people you love and just creating something that's special to you and hopefully special to the audience. You know, there's nothing better than that.
Couldn't have said it better myself. We only have a couple minutes here left. So I wanted to get some of I kind of asked this of all my guests, but, you know, for somebody that may be listening that wants to either kind of do what you do or get more involved in it, dive more into it, you know, what's just some general encouragement and advice that you give folks?
So the best advice, well, two things. First, don't stop. Just don't stop. Even if something doesn't work out, you know, it's amazing that things get made and premiere because there are a million, you know, pits you can fall into before it ever even comes out. You know, something can go wrong on the set. You don't get the footage. Somebody can bail out in the middle of a production and you need to, I mean, all these terrible things can happen. But if you want to create, you can't stop. You cannot stop because that is the guarantee it will never get done. You might have to rethink. You might have to recoup. Maybe you have a later start date when it comes out, but don't stop. If you want to do this, you cannot afford to stop. Create, be a part of a creation in any way you can. And the second thing is pick collaborators who are smarter and more talented than you are. Like I was talking about casting before, I think that's my gift, is that I find people who are smarter and more talented than me, who know things I don't know, who do things I don't do, they're better actors, they know better how to film. It's like it's never a bad thing to be surrounded by people who are smart. So surround yourself with smart, capable, artistic collaborators because that's what raises the game. If you feel like I have to control this, I have to be the smartest one in the room, it has to be in my way, you don't grow. It's not going to be as good. So surround yourself by great people, great artists, and listen to them. And don't be so precious about your own ideas. If they have an idea, listen to it, incorporate it, and then you really got something.
Man, that last bit of advice could really be a summary for this podcast. my thesis behind it. Like I was not somebody that started this show like, let me go ahead and monologue or whatever. And part of that's, you know, just, you know, growing in self-confidence because there's a lot of podcasts I listen to where hosts do kind of monologue more. It is kind of them and their thoughts and whatever. And I really have grown to appreciate that. And I see the value in being such an expert in something that you can, you know, talk about it and share and really dive in. But it started from an earnest place of I want to have folks like yourself on who are smarter and more creative and like in these types of ways. And I just affirm that piece of advice because I feel like that's how I've gotten anywhere in life and learned and grown is by just surrounding myself with people that just are really great people that have gone through a lot themselves and know how to learn and grow. And really the maturity point for me is realizing like it is a collaboration to bring it full circle. Like you really do support each other in that because we all have different gifts and things we bring to the table. So there's always going to be value in surrounding yourself with people that are more gifted or talented than you in certain areas. But I think the full circle, the holistic moment is when you realize like there's a mutuality there. We can all kind of learn from each other. Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And, you know, so Corey, you know, for you, listen, you do this podcast, you do the stand-up comedy, you have this spark, you have this thing that you do that makes you the smarter person in the room, you know. So when you come in, you bring this experience to the group. And then, I mean, you're right, there is a mutuality to it because then we ping pong off each other, right? We work together and something new comes out of that collaboration. And to me, that is just beautiful. That's just the most beautiful thing about doing this. Where can people follow you and follow your work and obviously watch Abnormal Fixation? Well, we'll start with where they can find Abnormal Fixation. We're on YouTube. We have our own channel. It says AF. That's the official abbreviation for Abnormal Fixation. We say creepy as creepy AF, right? Or funny AF, all that kind of stuff. So look for it on YouTube. You can find my blog, Reflections on Film and Television, terrible URL, but I'm not a shorthand kind of guy. You can find me on Twitter at JK Muir. Let's see, where else can you find me? I'm on Facebook, John Kenneth Muir. We have an Abnormal Fixation
page on Facebook. We got a lot of followers and likes, and I'd love to have new people come on and tell us what they think of the show or what they'd like to see in future episodes.
And what about johnkennethmuir.com?
Oh, yes. Oh, my gosh. Well, that's a really old website.
Oh, okay.
I think I updated the front page, so it's got a picture of me and says, like, creator of Abnormal Fixation, but it's like one of these horrible old, like, page builder pages.
Like GeoCities?
Yeah, that's right. It's from 2004. And it's like, oh, my gosh, that's a really old website. But, yeah, it's there, too. So it's out there.
Awesome. Well, be sure to follow John on all the social medias. John Kenneth Muir. That's an important distinction.
It
Need
is.
the middle name.
You need the middle name.
Don't want to get it confused with the other John Muir. Go follow John, all his work, read the blog, buy his books, check out Abnormal Fixation. Obviously, I mean, I'm excited to be a part of it. I think, folks are really, anyone that's seen it has already loved it. If you haven't seen it yet, check it out. I think you'll love it. And just plug and get connected. John's an awesome guy. He's done everything he's talked about, surround himself with great people, create a really cool community around his art. Check out The House Between, enter The House Between, all this stuff. I mean, there's no shortage of ways to kind of plug in and connect. But John, I just want to thank you again so much for not only allowing me to be a part of Abnormal Fixation, be a part of the extended family, but for coming on the show and being willing to share all about your life's work.
Well, Corey, thank you so much for having me on the show. And I just got to tell you, Alicia and Chris and Kim and Tony and all the people who've been involved in everything that I've been doing for 20 years, you're in this for life.